Welcome back to my channel. And today is a video about retrograde season 2022. Then it's the beginning of a series of videos about retrogrades in the outer planets in particular, as the planets move through the human design mandala and what that means for us. I'm not exactly sure how many videos are going to be in this series because I have to admit that my gate 48 the gate of wisdom has gotten the better of me, and I have been researching all day, and I have been really excited about what I'm learning. And so I'm delighted to be able to share some of that with you. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Chances are you're most familiar with Mercury retrograde, right? Usually Mercury retrogrades 3 times a year. Lucky 2022, we're getting Mercury retrograde 4 times a year. And the reason that we know about Mercury retrograde is Mercury is the god of communication and also affects technology because so much of our technology is communication technology these days. And so people bemoan having Mercury retrogrades. We're not going to talk about Mercury retrograde today. We're going to start today with Pluto, and then we're going to do Neptune and Uranus and Saturn. And the outer planets are very different than the inner planets in terms of their effect on us. The outer planets go retrograde once a year. Now, what is retrograde? Retrograde is when a planet appears to be going backward in the sky. Usually what's happening, it looks like it's going forward motion in its orbit, and then it stands still, which is called station in astrology, and then it retrogrades back over the area it's been, and then it turns around again and goes direct. And when it's doing that in the human design system, it's going back and forth through gates of the mandala. And so we're getting certain gates of the mandala really highlighted. And depending on which one of the planets it is and which gates they're in, it can be longer or shorter. And we're going to go into that in a lot of detail today about where Pluto is, because it's actually very, very important. Please remember that this retrograde motion is actually an illusion. The planets continue in their orbit the way that they always do. This is just something that we perceive having to do with the relationship of the sun and the earth and the particular planet. Okay, so it's not actually changing its orbit. It's not really going backwards. But it does affect how we experience the energies that are coming to us. And the inner planets all move much faster, right? They're much closer to the sun and they move much, much faster. And then the outer planets move much slower. And Pluto is way out there, and it takes 84 years for Pluto to go all the way around the sun. Okay, so Pluto's really way out there. And even though Pluto has been demoted to being a dwarf planet, Pluto is still very important in the human design system and still important in astrology as well. The outer planets are much more important in terms of how they are affecting the collective, whereas the inner planets are a bit more personal. So as we're looking at Pluto and the outer planets, we're going to be looking at trends that are really affecting the collective. Like this is really about what's affecting everyone. Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus are retrograde about 40% of the time. So that's a lot of the time, right? Whereas Saturn is a little bit less than that, is about 35% of the time, but still a substantial, like 4.5 months out of the year. So they're going retrograde for much longer, whereas Mercury retrogrades are usually about 3 weeks long. Right? 3 to 4 weeks long. So you can tell it's really quite different. And the Venus retrogrades are shorter, the Mars retrogrades are shorter. So they do really affect us, and because they are going on for a long time. And as I said, they're going, back through different gates and then forward. And even sometimes they go back again and forward again. So it's worth our attention to dive in to see how this movement is affecting us. You can see by looking at this image here of the retrograde season that there are a lot of planets that are retrograde at the same time. They've slowly been retrograding, and now this is really picking up. July, August, September, October. It's kind of retrograde season. And I went back all the way back as far as my ephemeris went, which is back to 2001. And it does seem to happen every year, although not as strongly as it has been happening the last few years. And so we're going to have a lot of different planets that are retrograde during this time, all the way through, the early part of the fall. So it's worth it to be understanding how these energies are influencing us. So the effects of retrograde season can be a sense that things are slowing down, that we're moving kind of through quicksand or through peanut butter, that we have obstacles in the way, things are, getting in front of us when we thought we were moving forward, and things seem to be stopping us. You might feel like you're losing momentum or you're losing motivation. You might even forget what you're doing. But it's just generally a sense of, I was kind of moving forward and now not so much. So what to do, right? In general, here is pause and notice. So rather than trying to struggle against what the energies are influencing us with, is just to kind of pause and notice and go, okay, so what can I do that's different than what I was doing before? So generally speaking, with these retrogrades, you can think of it as like take another look, right? Because something's going forward and then it's coming back over the same terrain. So we're going back for another look. Or you can go, I'm going to go deeper into a subject. It's kind of like when you read a book the first time. My dad used to always say, he's an English professor, he used to always say, you read a novel the first time for story. And then when you go back and you read it again, then you're able to kind of see how the story is put together. And when you read it again, you start to see how the characterizations are really built in relation to each other, right? I mean, there's a way through literary analysis that you read something over and over again, and every time you do, you're going deeper into what it is that you're looking at. So retrogrades are kind of like that. They're going, okay, let's go deeper with this. Let's review what happened in the forward motion and see what maybe needs to be, recalibrated, right? Is there something that needs to be renovated or restored or replaced or regenerated or renewed, right? And so the re-words, you often hear this around Mercury retrograde, right, is to use any of those re-words. So Pluto, what is Pluto? So Pluto is the god of the underworld. It's a kind of phoenix energy or a Kali energy. It's like destroy and be reborn. Burn it down, build it up. Crash and burn and begin again. Down into the depths to gain new perspective. Break out of patterns in order to create new habits. Break apart your mindset, your belief system, so that you can create a new one. Okay, this is how Pluto is really understood in astrology. And it's also, kind of Scorpio energy. The thing about Scorpio is that it's the only astrological sign that actually transforms inside of itself. It goes from the scorpion to the serpent to the phoenix. And so this is a deeply transformative energy if you can kind of grab a hold of it and make your way through the kind of crash and burn, the destroy, and level everything so you can start over again. And so we want to remember that when this is happening in our lives or when it's happening in the collective, it's happening so that there can be a rebirth, so that we can regenerate, so that we can start again. Now, in human design, we tend to think of Pluto as this kind of expansion, but challenge energy, right? We're challenged by something, but we're challenged so that we can grow and we can evolve and we can transform through releasing what we no longer lead, and in order to be able to renew ourselves and to be reborn or to be rejuvenated or to be regenerated into something else. Regenerative governance governance systems, regenerative economies, regenerative civilization even, is that we're looking at how can we come out of this kind of Pluto cycle of burning everything down so that we can regenerate. Pluto went retrograde on April 29th, and it was in the gate 60. Then on September 5th, it's going to enter the gate 61. So it's moving back over terrain that it's been on. It's going to go back into the 61. And then on October 8th, it's going to go direct in the gate 61. But what's happening here this summer is only part of a much longer Pluto cycle that started on January 6th, 2019, when Pluto first entered the gate 61. Then on January 15th, 2022, it enters the gate 60. And then in January 2025, it's going to exit the gate 60. So Pluto is going back and forth through the 60 and 61 during this 6-year cycle. It's 6 years that it's spending in these gates. And it's actually, I went back and I looked at some of these Pluto cycles in the past, and this one is actually particularly long, which is interesting, right? Pluto is really saying to us, look at the themes of what is brought up by the 60 and 61. Now, this is very interesting because both of these gates are in the knowing circuit. Now, remember that the knowing circuit is individual circuitry. It's mutative. It's here to be different. It's here to bring change, and it does not fit in. Fascinating, right? Because what is Pluto, right? Pluto is about mutation. It's about transformation. And so the god of transformation, if you will, is in a very transformative circuit in the human design system. You'll see here that the gate 61 is right up here at the very beginning of the knowing circuit. And it's in the head, right? And it's plugged directly into superconsciousness, whereas the 60 is down here on the root center. So they're at the opposite ends of the knowing circuit and on the opposite ends of our central channel, right? Because our energy runs through us, going down into the earth and then up into the sky. And so this is running right through our central channel. So let's talk about the gate 61. So the gate 61 in traditional human design is known as mystery, and in quantum human design is known as wonder. And I love this gate. I have this gate defined in my chart, and it as I said, it's plugged directly into superconsciousness. This is a place where we get downloads, we get inspirations, we get insights that come in from superconsciousness. And because of our conditioning into left brain energy, we often question these things that come in because the knowing circuit is not left brain, it's not rational, it's not logical, it's not reasonable, it's not analytical, it's none of those things. And so it really kind of stands outside of the worldview that wants to know that we can prove things, that wants to know your sources, that wants to be able to replicate this, right? As we do in the scientific method. We want to be able to test something to know that it's true. And what's coming in through that 61 is not like that at all. I mean, it's really out of the box ideas, perspectives, impressions, dreams, sometimes, day dreams, sometimes nighttime dreaming, right? That's why it's mysterious. And when we open to it, we can be in a kind of awe of what's coming in through that 61. Then the gate 60, which is down on the root, it's all the way on the other side of the body, the other side of the spine, is grounded in the root. Now, the 60 in traditional human design is known as acceptance, and in quantum human design is known as conservation. Now, the energy comes in through the head, and then it splits and goes out around both sides of the body, and then it comes up through the central channel, up into the 60, and then it's going to come all the way up and out through the throat, right? So the role of the gate 60 is to pause and to question, to take a look at these really breakthrough, innovative ideas that have come in, these perceptions, these dreamscapes, if you will, and question and discern which of this is really helpful. Which of this do we want to carry forward? Which of this do we want to kind of bring out into the tribes and into the collective? Because remember, this is individual circuitry. And so we always want to question this kind of mutative energy, because not all mutations are necessarily helpful. And not all mutations are helpful at this time. It might be that they're going to be helpful at another time. And so that's what the 60 is doing. It's accepting the energy, but then it's also kind of conservative. It's going, is this something that we want to be moving forward or not? Is this the right time for it to be moving forward or not? Is it better for it to move forward later than it's moving forward right now? So if you think about this, Pluto, right, is going back and forth between the 60 and the 61. We're bringing in cosmic information and then discerning what's useful. And we're asking the questions about what's actually true. What do we believe? What's of value? What to keep and what to discard? How do we know? Right? Because again, this is very mutative energy. It's leading edge, out of the box ideas, right? And so how do we know what's really going to be useful for us? Now, remember that the outer planets are more about the collective, although it does influence every one of us. When I started to really dig into this, think about this for a minute. We're seeing this in the collective all over the place, right? The claims about fake news. Is it fake news? Is it real news? Claims that the U.S. election was stolen. Or the debate about, is authoritarianism better or is democracy better? Disputes about, is climate change real and how real is it and how fast is it working? Do we need to move forward with it or not? What's true of U.S. history? There have been huge fights over what's being taught as U.S. history. Do we include the history of indigenous people, for example, and of African Americans, or do we continue to suppress their histories as we did in the past? Right? Huge debates about that. Is COVID real or not? I don't really know how people can still think that COVID's not real, but there are people who believe that COVID is not real, right? But then there's other things like, are vaccines safe or not? What's the best way to deal with COVID, like with the governments, right? Governments have done all kinds of different things in terms of how they've dealt with COVID. What's the right way to deal with COVID? And that has a lot to do with, what science do we believe? Is science real? Whose science? Whose science do we believe? How do we know what we know? What do we study? Is it truth or is it propaganda? There's been a lot of this around COVID. And then if we dig into things that are maybe not quite so specific as those debates have been, but nevertheless, we can really see what's going on in the minds and the hearts of so many people. Things like, are we isolated physical beings in a physical universe, right? Or are we actually energetic beings, part of an energy universe in which we are all connected through the web of life? And things that then fall out of that, right? The sense of, are we all in this together? Are we a species as humanity? Are we coming together for the greater good? Or is everyone out for themselves? Or are certain, groups, populations out for themselves? Like, do some people deserve to be wealthy while others are not? I mean, the forward movement of wealth that has happened dramatically in the last 40 years, is that something that deserves to happen or not? Is the earth and all of its life forms here for the use of humanity? Is it really our birthright to be able to, mine the earth, to cut down the trees, to mine the oil and all of that? Or is it not really something that is such a great thing for us to be doing? Is the earth really our home and our mother? And do we want to revere and honor this? These are things that are really up, and I've never seen this level of polarization before in so many different realms during my lifetime. So I'm 63, and I was alive during the civil rights movement and the second wave of feminism. And we definitely saw a lot of polarization during that time. But it was, and that had to do with, rights for African Americans and for other people of color and for women and white women and women of color. But it was still largely inside of this context of the story of progress and of Western privilege that a lot of us still really believed in. We believed that, we could go to the moon, and that almost that, energy was limitless, and we weren't thinking so much about climate change or about pollution and all of that kind of stuff, right? And now it feels to me like everything is up, right? It's almost every place that you look that there are debates that are happening, and there's a lot of polarization that's happening. And this is Pluto that is driving us to think about, what do we want to keep? What do we want to release? What needs to be burned down, right? So that we can regenerate. Right? I wanted to understand this a little bit better. So I dug into, Pluto's cycles, and it takes Pluto 84 years to circle the sun, much longer than that to move around the human design mandala. So take a look here at this image. You can see Pluto here in the gate 61. And I wanted to see, well, where was Pluto 84 years ago? Like, how does the cycle of Pluto around the mandala work with its cycle around the sun? And it turns out that they're very different. And I kind of suspected that because if it's going back and forth through gates every year, right, then its cycle is going to be much longer. But it turns out they're not consistent. Sometimes these cycles are, like this one we're looking at right here with the 60 and the 61, 6 years. Some of them are only 3 years. Some of them are 4 years. I don't know why that is true. I haven't dug into that level of research yet, but I find the fact that that is true fascinating. So, for example, back 84 years ago, Pluto was in the gate 12, which was only 37 gates prior to where it is now, 37 out of 64, right? So that means that no one alive today saw the last time Pluto was in the 61-60 cycle. This only comes around, rarely. And I think that I'm sure that there are earlier times when there were transitions like this that happened, because obviously Pluto was in the 60 and 61 at some point in the past. I don't know exactly when, but you could think about like the transition between earth-based spirituality and Christianity. Right? It's a huge time when so much was being questioned. And, how do we know what we know? How do we believe what we believe? What is useful? What are we going to discard? What are we going to keep? Or the transition to Western science out of Christianity. Not necessarily leaving Christianity completely behind, but the polarization of science and religion, right? And so this is a really, really potent time that we're in. If you think back to some of those earlier times when potentially this was also going on. So my invitation to you is to really be considering for yourself what you believe, how you know what you know, and what you want to stand for. Because this is definitely a time of reckoning. I'm sure you already know that. But it's worth saying again and saying out loud, and for us to be really paying attention to this, because what are we going to do here at this time on planet Earth, right? And remember that all of this is in the knowing circuit. It's mutative, it's individual, it's evolutionary, and it's plugged into superconsciousness, which in my rule book largely means that we are pulling in from the all that is things that can really help us. Now, some people really believe that there are dark forces that are out there, and that may be true. We could be pulling in information from dark forces as well. So whenever you are bringing in information through this 61, that you want to make sure that you are doing it always asking for guidance to be coming from the highest light. Okay, that it's always coming for the greatest good, because sometimes you might be pulling in something that's not so good for everybody. Okay, so Pluto is tearing down the old so that we can create the new. And the question I just want to leave you with is, what's going to be your part in this? Okay, that's my video for today. Make sure to go and watch the other videos in this series as they come out. Okay, many blessings, much love.